picture frame. Yeah, you can open up a new file in Rhino. That might be just as easy. Okay, so we have this. Use the picture frame command to put it in. And now let's go ahead and just select that and type scale. And we'll go down to our scale here. Remember, we want to do it at the center lines of these lines. Type 20 meters. Okay. So now that's scaled. Then the thing I'm going to want to do now is lock it. So type lock. That locks it in place so that I can draw without having to worry about it. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a layer for the contours and make that active. Or rename one of the layers. Then we're going to use our interpolate curve tool. And I would turn off the object snap. And I would turn off ortho. And then I'm just going to come over here and start to If you guys haven't figured it out yet, by pressing the space bar, it will redo the last command. Okay. So one of the things we have to do, we have these at 50 meters, and that's fine. But up here we don't have what that next 50 meters is, so we have to give it a little bit more information about how to create that upper piece. So one of the things that I would do is start to look at this. We have this contour line here that you guys can see that is starting to represent the top of the hill. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I know that is one more 10 meters, but I'm just going to go ahead and create that one. We can see it's starting to come back over here, so I'm just going to develop it like that. In here we don't have too many. Let's just knock them out. Some more curves here. So one thing I'm doing here is I'm putting together the, again, as I'm adding the contours, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing with these contours so that later I can use them. So let's say I wanted to make a Illustrator diagram or something like that. I'm just going to go ahead and start to organize these so that they make sense for me. So select the new curves that you're going to make, that you made, and again go through the same technique of moving them up in 10-meter increments. Make sure the ortho is turned on. And I'm just deselecting the next one and doing that same process. So when we skip to the next one, we have to move up because we already have this at that contour. So the next line is going to be this set. We have to move as we jump from this set to this set. This one's going to be moved up 20 meters. what I've done. So having that rectangle, using that rectangle, I wasn't able to replicate what you guys did. So if I get rid of that rectangle and just use the contours, then it actually creates a surface that expands past those contours, and then I can use that rectangle to trim it back down to the way I want. So what I just did is I locked that down so that's not going to be selectable. And then I just type in patch, and then I'll select all of those contours, hit enter. Okay, and then it brought up this dialog here. So you guys, it should default at 1. And if you click preview, you're going to get a surface that follows through on that. So a couple of things that I was looking at was I want to make sure that it's following these contours that I have created fairly closely. So by changing that sampling point, so right now it's looking along those lines every 1 meters to develop whether or not it's going to create a curve in there. But if I change that down and I put it down to 0.25, so it's looking every 1/4 meter, I get a slightly tighter map, not a huge difference, but just a little bit tighter. Then we click OK, and we have that surface now. Now if we go into the top view, and I will type unlock, and so now I'm going to scale this to where I want my and I'm just using the gumball to scale. Okay, so I've got that set down. Let me put on just switching that to ghosted. So you can see the surface. Okay. So now I'm going to take and type in trim, selecting my cutting object, and so that cutting object is this curve. Hit enter, and then the object to trim is this surface. So it's trimmed out that surface. Now I have just the surface. Okay. So from that surface, I can then go and use the edges and some of these other pieces to if I was going to create a solid model, I might go through, turn on the object snaps, and go and select these endpoints to start drawing some lines from the endpoint. I could start to fill that up, and that would create a solid that I could take into the CNC machine and start to use that. I could actually, if we had a 3D printer big enough, you know, we could create a solid and have it start to develop it for the 3D printer. But for our purposes, this is probably just fine with what we have right here. And one technique that I used in school a little bit that's actually, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but one thing I used to do is actually make these models, and I would construct them like I would really construct a basswood model, and then I would actually render it as a basswood model so that it had a wood surface, and I would use that. So sometimes you can't get real good photographs, or you don't have a time to build a nice wood model. Sometimes you can fake it a little bit. So I've done that. That works pretty well. Okay, so now we have this surface, and I'm going to turn off these contours now. And then I'm going to use new contours. I'm going to type in new layer. I'm going to make that active. Oh, where did our surface go? Is it on that? Okay. And then I'm going to make another layer, or rename this layer. Topo on the topo layer. Turn off those contours. And I'm just switching the new contours to black so you guys can see it a little bit better. So Rhino has a contour command. So you can select this object, and it gives you some options here about assigning layers, grouping layers. Right now, let's just leave it the way it is. And then it's going to ask you for the base point. So I'm just going to select down here at the bottom. And the direction. So I'm just going to go straight up from that. And it's going to ask me the distance between contours. So now this is where, if we're creating laser cuts, then that's where you would start to figure out, okay, what's my overall scale, how thick is my material, and how thick is that material, what does that mean in terms of actual model scale units, or real scale units. So if I have, it might be that an 1/8 inch thick piece of chipboard might actually equate to, let's say, a 2-foot contour or whatever, depending on the scale of the model that you're making. And that's what you would put in here. So let's say that it's actually 1.5, and I'll just put in that distance between, and that represents the thickness of my material. And I'm doing this wrong just so you can see the difference a little bit. So the way that the contour works, it works based on its viewport. So if I'm in a perspective view, it's going to do the contours in a perspective manner. Are we all done? So see how the contours from the front view are angled because of its relationship to the view that it was taken in. So let's undo that. Okay, so when you're doing a contour command, you really want to be in an orthogonal view, usually in the front view. And now let's do the contours again. Select the object, select our base point, select the direction. We'll keep it at the, let's make it 2 because that was kind of crazy. Okay, so now we have our contours here. Now if we go back into perspective, now we start to get the contours that start to look correct. Now you can do, now these are ready to be exported, so you could select and export them to Illustrator and use those as part of diagrams or site plans and that sort of thing to your scale. This is also very handy if you're switching between meters and imperial units, inches and feet. So you can use that to create new site plans that way. But these are also set up for your laser cutting. A couple of tricks that you can do. A typical kind of model would be laser cutting every single layer. That takes a lot, and you would stack the layers. But there's other techniques that you could do that save a little bit of material. So you could say sort these so every fourth or fifth contour layer is what you actually cut out. So you'd start to, you'd have one set that is 1, 4, 8, and then you'd have another one that would be, 2, 5. You see what I'm saying? And then when you lay those things out on your page, on your contour cut, and you cut those out, then you don't have a complete overlap, and so you get this stair-step effect. Saves material, but the edge conditions, you have to have props and some other things in there to make them stay up, and you have to cover up the edges. So, when you think about it, I found that if you do just every other, that's not enough overlap to make it work really effectively. So every third is probably the minimum that I would do. Have you guys got any? You did every sixth? Yeah. You have any thoughts on that? Yeah. I mean, the best is to do just every contour and have it solid. I mean, that really makes the best quality model, but that's expensive. So, thinking about how you work smartly. The other things that you can do, if you get into it a little bit more, is that you could actually start to cut sections. You could model this exactly. So each one of these contours could be extruded to the thickness and start to create that overlap. And then you can take a section cut through it and create a stair-step grid support system to hold those up if you want to get really fancy about it. But by that time, it's probably just best to just cut the whole thing and do it the right way. Just makes it easier.